Hey guys, tonight we're dropping you into the gritty, sun-scorched heart of the Wild West, where the air smells of dust and gunpowder, and every creak of a saloon door could mean trouble. Picture yourself stumbling off a rickety stagecoach, boots sinking into the dry, cracked earth of a frontier town in, say, 1870s Arizona. The sun's beating down, a harmonica wails somewhere, and folks with weathered faces size you up like you're a stray dog. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. The Wild West isn't the romantic cowboy flick you're imagining, it's a brutal, lawless grind where one wrong move lands you in a pine box. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from as we dive into this dusty tale. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up at dawn, sprawled on a lumpy straw mattress in a boarding house that smells like mildew and regret. The room's barely a closet, with splintered walls and a window that doesn't close right, letting in a chilly desert breeze. Your stomach's already growling, and the only thing you own is the ill-fitting shirt and trousers you're wearing, hand-me-downs from some drifter who didn't make it. Outside, the town's stirring, horses snort, a blacksmith's hammer clangs, and somewhere a rooster's screaming like it knows it's on tomorrow's menu. You've got no money, no friends, and no clue how to survive here. Welcome to day one in the Wild West. First things first, you need to figure out where you are. This is a bustling frontier town, maybe Tombstone or Dodge City, where cattle drives and gold fever keep things lively. Historical records show these towns were hubs of commerce and chaos, with population spiking in the 1870s as railroads and cattle trails brought dreamers and desperados alike. But here's the kicker, you're not a rugged cowboy or a sharpshooting outlaw. You're just you, with your modern sensibilities and zero survival skills. Good luck finding breakfast when the nearest Starbucks is a century away. You stumble onto the main street, a dusty strip lined with false front saloons and general stores. People brush past, cowhands in chaps, a shopkeeper sweeping his porch, a woman in a bonnet who glares like you stole her last biscuit. The air's thick with the scent of horse manure and fresh-cut timber. You spot a sign for grub, 25 cents outside a dingy eatery, but your pockets are emptier than a politician's promises. You consider begging, but the locals don't look charitable. One grizzled old-timer with a tobacco-stained beard spits near your boots and mutters, "Greenhorn." You're already sticking out like a sore thumb, and that's dangerous. In the Wild West, blending in is survival rule number one. Let's talk about the town's vibe. It's loud, rough, and smells like a mix of sweat and whiskey. The main streets a churn of mud and dust, depending on the last rain, and every other person's packing a pistol. Historians still argue whether these towns were as violent as legends claim. Some say shootings were rare, others point to newspaper reports of weekly gunfights. Either way, you feel the tension. A quirky tidbit? Towns like these often had more saloons than churches, and some even taxed prostitutes to fund civic projects. Bet you didn't expect to be dodging both bullets and shady tax collectors on your first morning. You decide to try your luck at the general store, hoping for a job or a handout. The bell jingles as you step inside, and the shopkeeper, a wiry man with a mustache like a broom, eyes you suspiciously. Shelves are stocked with canned beans, flour sacks, and tools you don't know how to use. You ask about work, but he laughs, a dry, raspy sound. "You ever driven cattle, boy? Shot a horse?" You shake your head, and he points to the door. "Come back when you're useful." Ouch! Modern you is about as useful here as a smartphone with no signal. Maybe you could chop wood or sweep floors, but even those jobs go to locals who know the game. The sun's climbing higher, and your throat's dry as the desert outside. Water's not free, nothing is. You spot a trough for horses, but the green slime floating on top kills that idea fast. You're starting to realize the Wild West doesn't care about your feelings or your 5-star Yelp reviews. Survival here means grit, and you're running low already. You hear a commotion down the street, shouts, a horse whinnying. 2 men are squaring off, hands hovering over their holsters. The crowd scatters, and you're frozen, wondering if you should run or hide. Day one's barely started, and you're already in over your head. Your stomach's now growling loud enough to wake a hibernating bear, and you're sweating through your shirt. You think about stealing a loaf of bread from a nearby cart, but the vendor's got a shotgun propped against his stall. Bad idea. Maybe you could scrounge for scraps behind the saloon, but that means dodging drunks and stray dogs. The Wild West is already testing you, and it's not grading on a curve. You're not just out of place, you're out of your depth, and the day's only getting hotter. You're still reeling from your rough start in this frontier town, the sun now a relentless hammer overhead, turning the dusty street into a furnace. Your mouth so dry it feels like you swallowed a handful of sand, and your stomach staging a full-on rebellion. You need food and water, pronto, but in the Wild West, nothing comes easy. The town's alive with clatter, wagon wheels grinding, a distant banjo plinking, but there's no sign of a friendly face offering you a free meal. Survival here means scavenging, bartering, or plain old begging, and you're not exactly a natural at any of those. Let's see how you fare in this barren land where desperation is the daily special. You shuffle toward the edge of town, hoping to find something, anything, to eat or drink. The main street fades into a sprawl of shacks and lean-tos, where the desert stretches out like an endless, mocking void. Historical records paint a grim picture. In the 1870s, frontier towns often faced food shortages, especially during droughts or when supply wagons were delayed. Cattle towns relied on canned goods and tough beef, but fresh produce? Forget it. You're not biting into a crisp apple anytime soon. Your best bet is finding a stream or a cheap meal, but both come with risks that could make your day a whole lot worse. You spot a trickle of water in a ditch near a corral, but it's murky, and a stray dog's lapping at it like it's gourmet soup. You hesitate. Drinking that could land you with dysentery, which, fun fact, was a leading cause of death out here. Historians still argue whether poor sanitation or contaminated water killed more settlers, but either way, you're not desperate enough, yet. You turn away, stomach growling louder than a saloon brawl, and notice a small garden patch behind a sagging fence. A few wilted carrots poke out of the dirt. Jackpot? Not quite. A woman with a face like a thunderstorm steps out, clutching a broom like it's a rifle. Keep moving, stranger, she snaps. You back off, hands raised, realizing property lines are sacred here, and trespassing's a quick way to meet a shotgun. Food's not just scarce, it's a hustle. You head back toward the main street, eyeing a food cart where a vendor's hawking beans and cornbread. The smell hits you like a warm hug, but it's 25 cents a plate, and your pockets are still emptier than a bad comedian's tip jar. You try bartering your labor, offering to wash dishes, but the vendor laughs. You look like you'd break more plates than you'd clean. Ouch! You're starting to see the pattern: no skills, no sympathy. In the Wild West, you either bring something to the table or you don't eat at all. A quirky tidbit to lighten the mood? Some settlers got so desperate they ate prairie dogs, calling them barking squirrels to make them sound appetizing. Bet you're not that hungry yet, but give it a few hours. You wander toward the saloon, thinking maybe someone dropped a crust of bread or a half-eaten biscuit. The swinging doors creak as you peek inside, but the place is a zoo, cowboys shouting, glasses clinking, and a piano player hammering out a tune that sounds like a cat walking on keys. You spot a spilled pile of peanuts on the floor, but before you can dive for them, a burly man with a beard like a tumbleweed kicks them into the sawdust. "Keep walking, kid," he growls. "You're learning fast. Scavenging here means competing with folks who don't play nice. Water's still your biggest problem." You hear rumors of a well outside town, but it's a half-mile trek through blistering heat, and you're already dizzy. You stumble past a livery stable, where a kid's filling a horse trough with a bucket. You ask for a sip, and he squints at you like you're a rattlesnake. "Ain't free," he says, pointing to a sign, "Water, 10 cents a ladle." You're starting to think the Wild West invented price gouging. Desperate, you consider sneaking a drink when he's not looking, but the kid's got eyes like a hawk and a slingshot tucked in his belt. Not worth the bruise. The sun's climbing higher, and your head's pounding like a blacksmith's anvil. You slump against a hitching post, watching a wagon roll by with barrels of flour and salt pork, supplies you can't touch. You think about hunting, but you've never held a rifle, and the only wildlife you see is a scrawny coyote eyeing you like you're the meal. Maybe you could forage for berries, but the only plants around are prickly cacti, and you're not desperate enough to wrestle one of those. Yet. A passing preacher offers you a pamphlet about salvation, but unless it's edible, it's no help. You're starting to feel like the punchline in a cosmic joke, stuck in a world where survival's a skill you never learned. You drag yourself back toward the town center, hoping for a miracle. A bakery's window displays fresh loaves, but the price is $1, a fortune. You're tempted to steal, but the baker's got a revolver on his hip, and you've seen enough westerns to know how that ends. Your modern instincts, swiping an app for delivery or hitting up a drive-thru, are useless here. The Wild West doesn't care about your hunger or your thirst. It's a grind, and you're already fading. Day one's not even half over, and you're wondering if you'll make it to sundown. You're parched, hungry, and already regretting your imaginary trip to the Wild West, but now you've got a new problem, getting around. The town's buzzing, and you notice folks saddling up horses like it's second nature. You need to move, maybe to find work or that mythical well you heard about, but walking everywhere in this heat is a death sentence. Horses are the cars of the 1870s, and you've never ridden one. Saddle up, because you're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day trying to ride a horse without training in this unforgiving frontier. You shuffle toward the livery stable, where the air smells of hay and horse sweat. A dozen animals are tied up, snorting and pawing the ground, their eyes glinting with what you swear is judgment. Historical records show horses were central to life in the Wild West. By the 1870s, towns like Deadwood or Cheyenne relied on them for everything from cattle drives to mail delivery. Without a horse, you're stuck, and renting one costs more than you've got. Your only option is to convince someone to let you borrow one, but that's like asking to borrow a stranger's car today. Good luck. You approach a stable hand, a wiry kid with dirt-streaked cheeks, and ask to borrow a horse. He laughs so hard he nearly drops his pitchfork. "You ever ridden, city boy?" You admit you haven't, and his grin widens. "Pick old Thunder over there. He's gentle." You sense the sarcasm but don't have a choice. Thunder's a massive beast with a patchy coat and a stare that says, "I dare you." You clamber onto the saddle, which feels like sitting on a wooden plank, and immediately realize you have no idea what you're doing. The reins are a mystery, and your feet dangle awkwardly, nowhere near the stirrups. You give Thunder a tentative nudge, like you've seen in movies. Big mistake. He bolts forward, and you're bouncing like a ragdoll in a washing machine. The stable hand's cackling now, and a crowd's gathering, drawn to your disaster like moths to a flame. You pull the reins, hard, and Thunder rears up, nearly tossing you into the dirt. Your heart's pounding louder than a saloon piano, and you're clinging to the saddle horn like it's your last hope. A quirky tidbit? Some greenhorns in the Wild West tied themselves to their horses to avoid falling off, only to get dragged when the horse inevitably bolted. You're tempted to try it, but you'd probably just strangle yourself. You manage to slow Thunder down, but now he's trotting in circles, ignoring your feeble tugs on the reins. You're sweating buckets, and the saddle's chafing places you didn't know could chafe. Historians still argue whether most frontier injuries came from gunfights or mundane accidents like bad horse rides. Some say falls killed more than bullets. Either way, you're a walking, or wobbling, statistic. You try to dismount, but your foot catches in the stirrup, and you flop into the dust, earning a round of laughter from the onlookers. Thunder snorts, looking smug, and you're pretty sure he's plotting your demise. You dust yourself off, pride as bruised as your backside, and realize riding's not just about staying on, it's about control. Horses here aren't your friendly trail ride ponies, they're half-wild, trained for rough work like herding cattle or outrunning bandits. You need months to learn what locals mastered as kids. You try again, hauling yourself back onto Thunder, who's now eyeing you like you're a bad joke that won't quit. You manage a shaky walk, but every step feels like a gamble. The stable hand yells, heels down, back straight, but it's like telling you to perform brain surgery with a butter knife. Your plan to ride out to that well is fading fast. The road out of town stretches into the shimmering desert, and you imagine Thunder dumping you in a cactus patch miles from help. Even if you could ride, horses need water and feed, and you're still broke. You overhear two cowboys talking about a cattle drive needing hands, but they're looking for riders, not liabilities. One of them, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek, sizes you up and says, "Stick to walking, son, less you wanna be Coyote Chow." He's not wrong. A bad fall out there could break your leg, and there's number 911 to call. You dismount, carefully this time, and hand the reins back to the stable hand, who's still chuckling. "Told Y.A. Thunder's gentle," he says, winking. You're starting to hate this town. Your legs ache, your ego's in tatters, and you're no closer to water or food. Walking's your only option now, but the heat's climbing, and the desert's waiting to swallow you whole. The Wild West doesn't care if you're not a cowboy, it'll buck you off just the same. You limp back toward town, wondering if you'll ever get the hang of this place or if it'll break you first. You're limping back into town, still sore from your disastrous horse riding attempt, the dust clinging to your sweat-soaked shirt like a second skin. The sun's high now, baking the street, and you're no closer to food or water. But the Wild West doesn't give you a breather, trouble's always one wrong glance away. As you trudge past a saloon, you hear hooves thundering and spot a group of riders on the horizon, kicking up a cloud of dust. Their bandanas are pulled high, and their eyes gleam with bad intentions. Bandits! You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day when outlaws come calling, and they don't negotiate kindly. The townsfolk scatter like roaches, slamming shutters and diving behind barrels. You're frozen, heart hammering, as the riders gallop closer. Historical records confirm banditry was a real threat in the 1870s. Gangs like the James Younger crew terrorized towns and trains, often hitting places like this for quick cash or cattle. These aren't the charming rogues from your favorite westerns, they're hard men with harder lives, and you're just a soft target in their path. You duck behind a water trough, its slimy contents mocking your thirst, and peek out as the gang reins up in the street. There's 5 of them, all armed to the teeth, revolvers, rifles, even a shotgun that looks like it could punch a hole through a barn. Their leader, a lean man with a scar splitting his eyebrow, barks orders, and 2 of them dismount, kicking open the bank's door across the street. The others keep watch, scanning the town like hawks. You're no hero, but you're also not invisible. A kid hiding nearby points at you and whispers to his ma, who hushes him. Great! Now you're on the radar. You're starting to wish you'd stayed in that lumpy boarding house bed, splinters and all. You consider running, but where? The desert's a death trap, and the town's too small to hide in. A quirky tidbit to lighten the mood? Some bandits were so bold they'd send letters to towns beforehand, announcing their raids like twisted RSVPs. These guys don't seem that polite, though. The leader's eyes lock onto you, and he nudges his horse closer. "You there," he growls, voice like gravel. "Got any coin?" You stammer that you're broke, which is true, but he doesn't look convinced. Your modern instincts, maybe offering him your non-existent credit card, won't help here. He spits in the dirt and mutters, "Useless." The bank's door bursts open, and the two bandits haul out sacks of cash, whooping like it's Christmas. But then a shotgun blast rings out from a rooftop, some locals playing vigilante. The bandits return fire, and suddenly the street's a war zone. Bullets zing past, splintering wood and shattering windows. You flatten yourself behind the trough, praying it's thicker than it looks. Historians still argue whether townsfolk fought back against outlaws or just cowered. Some say community posses were common, others claim most folks hid. Right now, your team hide, heart pounding so loud you're sure the bandits can hear it. You peek up and see the leader take a bullet to the shoulder. He curses but stays mounted, firing back with eerie calm. One of his men's not so lucky, slumped in the dirt, clutching his chest. You're no doctor, but you know he's done for. The shooting stops as fast as it started, and the surviving bandits grab their loot and gallop off, leaving dust and chaos in their wake. You're alive, somehow, but the town's a mess. The kid from earlier runs out, cheering like it's a game, but his ma yanks him back, her face pale. You realize you're shaking, and not just from hunger. You crawl out from behind the trough, legs wobbly as a newborn colt's. The townsfolk re-emerge, muttering about forming a posse, but you're not volunteering. You're still processing how fast things went from bad to deadly. The street's littered with broken glass and a few stray bullets, and the bank's front door hangs off its hinges. You overhear a shopkeeper say the gang might be back. They know the town's weak now. Great! You're not just broke and hungry, you're in a place where danger rides in without warning. You stumble toward the saloon, hoping to blend into the crowd, but everyone's on edge, whispering about the raid. A bartender's wiping down the counter, muttering about damn outlaws and how the sheriff's useless. You're starting to see the Wild West's true face. It's not just about surviving the elements, it's about surviving the people. You've got no gun, no allies, and no clue how to spot trouble before it spots you. Those bandits didn't even need to target you to make your day worse. The Wild West is a pressure cooker, and you're already starting to crack. You're still rattled from the bandit raid, your heart barely settled from its jackhammer pace, as you slip into the saloon to escape the chaos outside. The air's thick with tobacco smoke and the sour tang of spilled whiskey, and the place is packed with cowboys, gamblers, and a few shifty types eyeing you like you're fresh meat. The saloon's the heart of this frontier town, but it's also a powder keg. One wrong word, one spilled drink, and you're in a fight you can't win. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day navigating a rowdy bar full of armed drunks in the Wild West. You squeeze through the crowd, trying to look inconspicuous, but your modern awkwardness sticks out like a neon sign. The saloon's a rough-hewn box of wood, with a long bar, wobbly tables, and a piano player banging out a tune that's more enthusiasm than skill. Historical records show saloons were social hubs in the 1870s, serving as bars, gambling dens, and even courthouses, but they were also where tempers flared and guns came out. You're not here for a drink, you can't afford one, but you're hoping to overhear something useful, maybe a lead on food or work. Fat chance. You find a corner near the bar, where the sawdust floor crunches under your boots. The bartender, a burly man with a mustache like a walrus, slaps a glass of amber liquid in front of a cowboy who's already swaying. You catch snippets of talk, cattle prices, a stagecoach robbery, someone muttering about the bandits from earlier. You're still thinking about that trough water you didn't drink, but here, even a glass of water costs a nickel. You're so thirsty you're tempted to lick the condensation off a bottle, but that'd probably get you thrown out, or worse. A card game's going at a nearby table, and the players are loud, tossing coins and accusations. One guy, with a face like a sunburned potato, slams his cards down and calls another player a cheat. The room tenses, hands inching toward holsters. You're starting to realize why saloons were trouble magnets. Historians still argue whether most saloon fights ended in shootings or just fists. Some say guns were drawn more for show than slaughter, but the bullet holes in the wall behind you suggest otherwise. You shrink back, hoping to stay invisible, but a drunk stumbles into you, sloshing whiskey on your shirt. "Watch it, greenhorn," he slurs, his breath like a distillery fire. You mumble an apology, but he's not having it. He squares up, and you notice the revolver on his hip, its handle worn from use. You're no fighter, your last brawl was probably arguing over a parking spot, and this guy looks like he wrestles steers for fun. You try to diffuse things with a weak smile, but he shoves you, and you stumble into a table, knocking over a bottle. The room goes quiet, and now everyone's staring. Great! You're the entertainment now. A quirky tidbit? Some saloons hired bouncers who doubled as undertakers, ready to drag out losers of fights, dead or alive. You're really hoping this place doesn't have one of those. You raise your hands, stammering, "No trouble, just passing through." The drunk squints, then laughs, but it's not friendly. "City boy, who? Bet you can't even throw a punch." He's not wrong, but you're not about to prove it. The bartender barks, "Take it outside," and you seize the chance to slip toward the door. But another cowboy, maybe smelling an easy mark, blocks your path. "Where you running to?" he says, grinning like a wolf. You're trapped, and the saloon's starting to feel like a cage with no exit. You try talking your way out, but your modern slang, something about chilling or no beef, just confuses him. He laughs, but it's mean, and his hand's still near his gun. You're sweating worse than when you tried riding thunder, and your stomach's growling loud enough to start a new fight. You glance at the bar, where a plate of beans and bacon sits untouched. You're so hungry you consider grabbing it and running, but that'd be suicide. The piano player switches to a jaunty tune, like he's mocking your panic, and you're starting to think the Wild West invented chaos as a lifestyle. Finally, the drunk loses interest, turning back to his drink, and the cowboy blocking you gets distracted by a card game. You slip out the swinging doors, heart racing, the night air cool against your damp skin. The saloon's noise fades behind you, but you're not safe, just out of the frying pan. The street's dark now, lanterns flickering, and you hear shouts in the distance. Maybe those bandits are back, or maybe it's just another bar fight spilling over. Either way, you're learning fast. The Wild West social scene isn't about making friends, it's about surviving egos, liquor, and loaded guns. You're still hungry, still thirsty, and now you're dodging drunks with itchy trigger fingers. This day's not getting any kinder. You've barely caught your breath from dodging that saloon brawl, the night air sharp with the scent of dust and distant campfire smoke. You're still penniless, parched, and now jittery from too many close calls. As you slink down the dark street, trying to avoid trouble, a grim scene unfolds ahead. A crowd's gathered under a gnarled oak, lit by flickering torches. Ropes creak, and angry voices rise. You've stumbled into a vigilante hanging, and the Wild West's brutal brand of lawless justice is about to show you why you wouldn't survive a day in its grip. You edge closer, curiosity overriding your better judgment. A man standing on a crate, hands bound, a noose tight around his neck. He's young, maybe 20, with a scruffy beard and eyes wide with terror. The crowd's a mix of townsfolk, shopkeepers, cowboys, even a preacher clutching a Bible but looking more vengeful than holy. They're shouting about stolen cattle and a dead rancher. Historical records confirm vigilante justice was common in the 1870s frontier, where sheriffs were often absent or corrupt, and towns took law into their own hands. But seeing it up close? It's a gut punch you're not ready for. The accused pleads, voice cracking, claiming he's innocent. A burly man in a leather vest, probably the ringleader, snarls, "Save it for the devil." You want to look away, but you're rooted, heart thudding. The crowd's bloodlust is palpable, and you realize blending in might be your only shot at staying safe. You pull your hat low, if you had one, and try to mimic their grim nods. But inside, you're freaking out. Modern you, with your Netflix binges and coffee runs, isn't built for this. You're wondering if you'd crack under this kind of pressure or just bolt and pray no one notices. The crate's kicked out and the man drops. The rope snaps taut, and the crowd falls silent, save for a few gasps and a woman's sob. You flinch, bile rising in your throat. The body sways, boots twitching, then still. You've seen death in movies, but this is raw, ugly, final. A quirky tidbit to cut the tension? Some vigilante groups called themselves regulators and even had bylaws, like a twisted book club for lynching. Doesn't make this less horrifying, though. You notice a few folks turning away, their faces pale, like they're regretting the show they cheered for. But most just nod and disperse, as if it's Tuesday's chores done. You're about to slip away when the ringleader's gaze lands on you. "You new here?" he asks, voice like a rusty blade. You nod, throat dry as the desert. He steps closer, sizing you up. "We don't take kindly to strangers siding with rustlers." Your stomach drops. You stammer that you're just passing through, but he's not buying it. The crowd's thinning, but a few linger, hands on pistols, watching you like you're next in line for the rope. Historians still argue whether vigilante justice targeted the guilty or just convenient scapegoats. Some say innocent drifters like you were often caught in the crossfire. Right now, the debate feels way too personal. You back away, hands raised, trying to look harmless. "I don't know nobody here," you say, voice shaking. The ringleader squints, then spits in the dirt. "Better keep it that way." He turns back to his men, and you seize the chance to scurry off, pulse racing. You duck into an alley, the hanged man's face burned into your mind. The Wild West justice isn't about evidence or trials, it's about fear and fast ropes. You're no criminal, but you're starting to see how easy it is to end up on the wrong side of a mob. You lean against a wall, catching your breath, the alley smelling of rotten stale beer. Your hunger's a dull ache now, overshadowed by the dread pooling in your gut. You're realizing the law here isn't a shield, it's a noose, and it swings for anyone who doesn't fit. You think about that saloon drunk who shoved you earlier, one wrong word, and he could have accused you of something, landed you on that crate. The town's quieting now, torches fading, but the tension lingers like smoke. You're still broke, still thirsty, and now you're dodging mobs with itchy rope fingers. You creep back toward the main street, sticking to shadows. The oak tree silhouette looms in the distance, a grim reminder of what happens when the crowd turns. You're starting to hate this place, its dust, its danger, its way of chewing up folks like you and spitting them out. The Wild West doesn't care about your innocence or your empty stomach. It's a world where justice is a lynching party, and you're one misstep from being the guest of honor. Day one's wearing you down, and the night's only getting darker. You're still shaking from that vigilante hanging, the image of the swaying rope seared into your mind as you slink through the town's shadows. The nights turn chilly, but your sweat-soaked shirt clings to you like a bad memory. You're desperate for a break, food, water, anything, but the Wild West doesn't do timeouts. As you shuffle past a livery stable, a sharp pain shoots through your leg. You glance down, and there it is, a rattlesnake, its fangs just pulling free from your calf. The bite's already swelling, and panic hits you like a runaway stagecoach. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day battling a snakebite with no real cure in sight. You stumble back, heart pounding, as the snake slithers into the dark. Its rattle echoes in your ears, a taunting goodbye. You've seen enough westerns to know this is bad. Rattlesnake bites were a death sentence for many in the 1870s. Historical records show venomous snakes, especially rattlers, were a constant hazard on the frontier, killing settlers and livestock alike. With no antivenom and spotty medical care, your odds are slimmer than a saloon dancer's paycheck. You limp toward the main street, hoping to find help, but every step sends fire up your leg, and your vision starting to blur. You spot a flickering lantern outside a general store and bang on the door, but it's locked tight. Folks don't open up after dark, not after that bandit raid. You shout for help, but the street's empty, save for a stray dog that looks more interested in your leg than saving you. The pain's spreading, and your calf's now a throbbing, purple mess. You remember some old cowboy trick about cutting the wound and sucking out the venom, but the thought makes you queasy. Plus, you've got no knife, and your hygiene's not exactly surgical. A quirky tidbit? Some settlers swore by dousing snake bites with whiskey, believing it neutralized venom. Spoiler, it didn't, but it probably made dying feel a bit cozier. You stagger toward the saloon, figuring someone there might know what to do. The crowd's thin since your last visit, but the air's still thick with smoke and sour laughs. You push through the swinging doors, clutching your leg, and call out, "Snakebite! Help!" The piano stops, and heads turn. A grizzled cowboy at the bar glances over, unimpressed. "Rattler got YA, huh? Sit down for you fall down." He points to a chair, but his tone says he's seen this before, and it didn't end well. You collapse onto the seat, leg pulsing like it's got its own heartbeat. The cowboy kneels, squinting at the bite. "Ain't deep, but you're in a pickle," he says, pulling a flask from his vest. He pours whiskey on the wound, and you yelp as it burns like hellfire. "Don't whine," he mutters. "Ain't the venom killing a YA yet, it's the panic." You're not sure if he's joking, but his smirk isn't comforting. He calls for a doctor, but the bartender shakes his head. "Doc's out delivering a baby in the next county." Great. You're stuck with frontier first aid, which feels like a coin toss between survival and a slow, sweaty end. Historians still argue whether snakebite remedies did more harm than good. Some say crude treatments like cauterizing wounds or tying tourniquets caused infections that killed faster than venom. You're starting to see why. The cowboy wraps your leg with a dirty bandana, muttering about keeping the poison from spreading. It's tight, too tight, and your toes are going numb. You're dizzy now, sweat beading on your forehead, and the saloon spinning like a bad carnival ride. You try to focus, but the pains are screaming banshee, and you're wondering if you'll pass out before you die. A woman in a faded dress pushes through the crowd, claiming she's got a cure. She hands you a foul-smelling poultice made of who knows what, maybe herbs, maybe last week's stew. "Slap this on," she says. You hesitate, but what choice do you have? You smear the goop on the bite, and it stings worse than the whiskey. The cowboy chuckles, like you're the punchline to a joke you don't get. "Might work, might not," he says. "Prying's free, though." You're not religious, but you're considering it. especially as your leg feels like it's plotting to secede from your body. You slump back, the saloon's noise fading to a dull hum. The poultice smells like death, and you're not sure if it's helping or just making you wish the snake had finished you off. The crowd's lost interest, back to their cards and drinks, and you're alone in your misery. The Wild West doesn't stop for your drama, snakes, bandits, or vigilantes, it's all just another day. You're still hungry, still broke, and now you're poisoned, with no doctor in sight. Your vision's dimming, and you're wondering if you'll wake up tomorrow or become another cautionary tale in this unforgiving frontier. Your legs throbbing from that snake bite, the saloon's poultice doing little but making you smell like a compost heap, and you're still lightheaded from hunger and thirst. You limp out of the saloon, the night air biting at your sweat-damp skin, hoping to find some kind of relief. But the Wild West doesn't offer respites, it throws you into the next fire. You hear a rumor buzzing through town, gold's been found in a nearby creek, and folks are losing their minds over it. You figure this could be your ticket out of poverty, so you join the chaotic gold rush, but you're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day chasing riches in this frenzied, cutthroat world. You stumble toward the edge of town, where a crowd's gathering near a dry riverbed. Torches flicker, casting wild shadows, and men shout about nuggets big as your fist. Historical records show gold fever gripped the West in the 1870s, with rushes in places like the Black Hills drawing thousands of dreamers, most of whom left broke or dead. You've got no tools, no experience, and no clue what you're doing, but the idea of striking it rich is too tempting. Maybe you can pan a few flakes and buy a meal, or a horse that doesn't hate you. You join the mob trudging toward the creek, a half-mile trek that feels eternal with your snake-bit leg screaming at every step. The crowd's a mix of grizzled prospectors, wide-eyed greenhorns like you, and a few shady types who look more interested in stealing than digging. The creek's a muddy trickle, barely ankle-deep, but folks are already elbowing each other for space. You don't have a pan or a shovel, so you kneel in the mud, scooping with your hands like a kid at a sandbox. The water's freezing, and your fingers go numb fast. You find nothing but pebbles and a crawfish that snaps at you like it knows you're out of your league. A prospector nearby, with a beard like a bird's nest, laughs at your pathetic splashing. "City boy, gold ain't just sitting there waiting for YA, he says, waving a rusty pan. He shows you how to swirl the sediment, but your hands shake, and you spill more mud than you keep. You're starting to see why most miners went bust, panning's backbreaking, and the gold scarcer than an honest politician. A quirky tidbit? Some miners got so desperate they faked gold strikes to scam investors, sparking mini-rushes that left folks like you digging in empty streams. You're hoping this creek's legit, but doubt's creeping in. You keep at it, ignoring the pain in your leg and the hunger gnawing your gut. The crowd's getting rowdy, two men start shoving over a prime spot, and one pulls a knife. You scoot away, not wanting to be collateral damage. Historians still argue whether gold rushes built the West or just broke people. Some say they spurred towns and railroads, others claim they ruined more lives than they enriched. Right now, your team ruined. Your hands are raw, your back screaming, and all you've got is a pile of wet dirt. The guy next to you crows about a tiny flake, and the crowd surges, nearly trampling you. This isn't a dream, it's a mud-soaked nightmare. You notice a few prospectors eyeing each other's claims, hands twitching near pistols. Stealing's as much a part of the gold rush as panning, and you're an easy mark. You try to look tough, but your limping, mud-caked self isn't fooling anyone. A burly miner with a scar across his nose bumps you hard, muttering, "Move, tenderfoot." You stumble, splashing into the creek, and lose what little gravel you'd collected. He laughs, and you're tempted to throw a rock at him, but his revolver's a strong argument against it. You're learning fast, gold fever turns folks into vultures, and you're the scrawniest prey. The night drags on, and the torches burn low. Your legs swelling worse, and you're shivering in your soaked clothes. You found nothing but a sore back and a deeper grudge against this place. Some miners pack up, cursing their luck, while others camp out, guarding their spots like dogs with a bone. You're too tired to keep going, but too broke to quit. You slump on the bank, staring at the stars, wondering if you'll ever find enough gold for a loaf of bread. The Wild West's promise of riches is a cruel tease, and you're sinking in its muddy trap. Day one's beating you down, and the creek's cold laughter isn't helping. You're shivering on the creek bank, your hands raw from panning for gold that never showed, your snake-bit leg pulsing with every heartbeat. The gold rush crowd's thinning, their torches fading into the night, but you're too exhausted to move. The desert stretches around you, dark and silent, except for the occasional coyote howl that makes your skin crawl. You're still broke, still hungry, and now you're soaked and freezing. But the Wild West doesn't care about your misery, it's about to crank up the heat, literally. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day facing the desert's deadly grip, where scorching days and dehydration are the real outlaws. You wake at dawn, sprawled in the dirt, the sun already a merciless fist pounding the landscape. Your mouth so dry your tongue feels like leather, and the creek's muddy trickle you tried drinking last night is long gone. Historical records show the American Southwest in the 1870s was brutal. Temperatures could hit 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and water sources were scarce, especially during droughts. Settlers and travelers often died of thirst, their bodies found bloated and baked by the relentless sun. You're not a seasoned desert rat, you're just you, with no canteen, no hat, and no clue how to find water. You stagger to your feet, legs still aching from the snake bite, and scan the horizon. Nothing but sand, scrub, and shimmering heat waves that make the ground dance. Your modern instincts, checking an app for the nearest gas station, are useless. You remember hearing about a well back in town, but it's a mile away, and the heat's already making your head swim. You start walking, boots sinking into the hot sand, each step a battle. The air smells of baked earth and your own sweat, and you're starting to see why the desert's called a graveyard. Your throat's a furnace, and every breath feels like inhaling ash. You spot a cactus, its spiky arms taunting you. You've heard you can drink from them, so you limp over, desperate. You try breaking it open with a rock, but the spines jab your hands, and the inside's a stringy, bitter mess that makes you gag. A quirky tidbit? Some settlers died trying to drink cactus pulp, not knowing most types hold more poison than water. You spit it out, cursing, and keep moving, your hand stinging and your hope fading faster than a mirage. The sun climbs higher, and you're sweating buckets, but it's not cooling you, it's draining you. You're dizzy now, vision blurring, and you stumble over a rock, landing hard on your knees. Historians still argue whether dehydration or heat stroke killed more in the desert. Some say thirst drove folks mad before the sun finished them. You're starting to feel it, your thoughts are foggy, and you're talking to yourself, muttering about iced coffee like it's a prayer. You spot a dry riverbed and scramble toward it, hoping for a trickle, but it's just cracked mud, mocking you with its emptiness. You're not alone, though. A vulture circles overhead, its shadow sliding across the sand like a bad omen. You shout at it, voice hoarse, but it just keeps gliding. You're starting to panic, heart racing despite your sluggish body. You think about digging for water, but you've got no tools, and the ground's hard as iron. You remember that saloon cowboy's whiskey flask, useless for snake bites, but you'd kill for a sip now. The desert's a thief, stealing your strength, your clarity, your will. You're not sure how long you've been walking, but town's nowhere in sight, and you're wondering if you'll collapse before you get there. You spot a lone tree, a scraggly thing offering a sliver of shade. You crawl beneath it, panting, and press your face to the ground, hoping for coolness that isn't there. Your legs swollen worse, and you're too weak to care about the snakebite anymore. You're starting to see things, a shimmering lake in the distance, a food truck parked by a saguaro. You laugh, a dry croak, because you know they're fake, but it hurts how much you want them. The Wild West's desert isn't just hot, it's cruel, promising nothing and delivering less. You're fading, and you know it. You curl up, trying to conserve energy, but the heat's a blanket you can't shake. Your lips are cracked, your eyes gritty, and you're wondering if you'll die here, another fool the desert claimed. The vulture's still watching, patient as death. You're still broke, still poisoned, and now you're a baked husk of yourself. The Wild West doesn't need bandits or ropes to kill you, it's got the sun, and it's doing just fine. Day one's turning into a nightmare, and you're not sure you'll see the sunset. You're curled up under that scraggly desert tree, barely clinging to consciousness, the heat and your snake-bit leg turning your body into a rebellion against itself. Your mouth's drier than the cracked earth, and you're hallucinating about iced water and air conditioning. But the Wild West doesn't do mercy, and as you drag yourself back toward town, you hear shouts and hoofbeats. A rancher spotted you limping near his grazing land, and now you're accused of cattle theft, a crime that could end with a rope around your neck. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day facing the Wild West's brutal justice for rustlers, especially with no defense. You stagger onto the main street, the town's dusty haze blurring your vision. A group of cowboys, led by a red-faced man with a handlebar mustache, rides up, their horses snorting. That's him, the rancher bellows, pointing at you. Caught him skulking near my herd. You try to protest, voice raspy, but your words come out like a dying frog's croak. Historical records show cattle rustling was a serious offense in the 1870s. Cattle were a rancher's livelihood, and thieves were often hanged or shot on sight. You're no rustler, but your limping, disheveled self looks guilty enough to this crowd. The rancher dismounts, his spurs jangling like a death knell, and grabs your arm. You got a story, boy, he growls. You stammer about the snakebite, the gold rush, anything to explain why you were near his land, but he's not listening. The crowd's gathering again, their faces hard from that vigilante hanging you witnessed earlier. You're starting to see a pattern, this town loves a good rope. Your legs throbbing, and you're swaying, but the rancher's grip is iron. You're thinking about that saloon poultice, useless then, useless now, and wishing you'd stayed there despite the drunks. A quirky tidbit to lighten the mood? Some ranchers branded their cattle with symbols so wild, think hearts or squiggles, that rustlers started forging them like bad signatures. Doesn't help you now, though. The rancher's men circle you, one twirling a lasso like he's itching to use it. You try to explain you're just a lost stranger, but the word greenhorn gets thrown around, and not in a friendly way. Historians still argue whether rustling trials were fair or just mob rule. Some say evidence was rare, and drifters like you were easy scapegoats. Right now, you're feeling like the scapegoatiest scapegoat in town. You're dragged toward the same oak tree from that hanging, and your stomach lurches. The crowd's muttering about justice and teaching thieves a lesson. You're not sure if they mean a noose or a beating, but neither sounds fun. You try to stand taller, but your leg buckles, and you drop to one knee, looking more guilty than ever. A woman in the crowd shouts, "He don't even look like a cowboy," and you're not sure if that's a defense or an insult. Either way, the rancher's not swayed. He pulls a rope from his saddle, and you're wondering if you'll survive long enough to explain. You spot a familiar face, the grizzled cowboy from the saloon who helped with your snakebite. You call out, desperate, hoping he'll vouch for you. He squints, then says, "He's just a fool, not a thief." It's not exactly a glowing review, but it buys you a pause. The rancher hesitates, rope still in hand, and asks if anyone else knows you. Silence. You're a nobody here, and that's the problem. The cowboy shrugs, adding, "He's too dumb to steal cattle." The crowd chuckles, and you're not sure whether to be relieved or offended. At least it's a laugh that doesn't end with a noose. The rancher's still fuming, but the mood shifts. A preacher steps forward, Bible in hand, suggesting they let the law handle it. You're hoping for a sheriff, but then you remember the bartender calling him useless. The rancher finally loosens his grip, spitting in the dirt. "Get out of my sight," he says, "but if I catch you near my herd again, you're done." You nod, too weak to argue, and limp away, the crowd dispersing with disappointed grumbles. You're alive, but only because you're too pathetic to bother killing. You collapse against a hitching post, leg screaming, head spinning. The town's buzzing again, like your near lynching was just afternoon entertainment. You're still broke, still poisoned, and now you're dodging accusations that could have ended you. The Wild West's justice is a coin toss, and you keep landing on the wrong side. You're starting to think survival here isn't about innocence, it's about luck, and yours is running thin. The sun's dipping low, casting long shadows, and you're wondering what fresh hell this town's got waiting before nightfall. You're slumped against the hitching post, your snake-bit leg a throbbing mess, your body aching from hunger, thirst, and the close call with that rustler's rope. The town's settling into a late afternoon hum, but you're not out of the woods yet, literally or figuratively. You hear the rumble of wheels and spot a stagecoach rolling in, dust billowing like a storm cloud. It's your chance to escape this cursed town, maybe find a fresh start somewhere else. But as you limp toward it, you realize the Wild West stagecoaches are no Greyhound buses. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day riding a rickety coach under bandit attack. You hobble to the stagecoach stop, where a crowd's already forming, passengers, gawkers, and a few shady types eyeing the luggage. The coach is a creaky wooden box on wheels, painted red but chipped and battered, pulled by 4 horses that look as tired as you feel. Historical records show stagecoaches were vital in the 1870s, carrying mail, money, and people across the frontier, but they were prime targets for outlaws. You've got no ticket, no money, but you're desperate. You approach the driver, a grizzled man with a cigar stub and a shotgun across his lap, and beg for a ride. "Got coin," he grunts. You shake your head, and he laughs. "Then you're walking, son." You're about to give up when a woman in a bonnet tosses you a pitying glance and says, "Help load the bags, and I'll pay your fare." You nod, grateful, and start hauling trunks, each one heavier than your fading strength. Your legs screaming, and the snakebite poultice is flaking off, leaving a stench that makes a passenger gag. You manage to load the last bag, and the woman hands the driver a coin for you. You climb aboard, squeezing onto a hard bench between a preacher and a salesman who smells like cheap cologne. The coach lurches forward, and you're off, rattling down a bumpy trail into the desert. The ride's a nightmare. The coach jolts like it's trying to shake your bones loose, and every bump sends pain shooting through your leg. Dust pours through the open windows, coating your throat, and you're coughing like you've inhaled a sandbox. The preacher's muttering prayers, and the salesman's complaining about the heat, but you're too busy gripping the seat to care. You're thinking about that bandit raid in town. Those same outlaws could be watching this trail. A quirky tidbit? Some stagecoach companies painted their coaches bright colors to scare off bandits, believing red meant danger. Clearly, it didn't work, because you hear a shout from the driver, "Riders! Get down!" You duck, heart pounding, as gunfire cracks outside. The coach speeds up, horses screaming, and you peek out to see 3 masked men on horseback, pistols blazing. The driver fires his shotgun, and the blast is deafening. A bullet splinters the wood near your head, and you're regretting every life choice that led you here. Historians still argue whether stagecoach robberies were as common as legends say. Some claim they were rare, others point to newspaper reports of frequent hold-ups. Either way, you're living one now, and it's not romantic. The salesman's whimpering, and the preacher's prayers get louder, but you're just trying not to wet yourself. The coach swerves, nearly tipping, and you're thrown against the salesman, who shoves you off like you're the problem. Another shot rings out, and the driver curses. The front horse is hit, slowing the coach. The bandits close in, shouting for the driver to stop. He doesn't, firing again, but you hear a thud. He's slumped over, wounded or dead. The coach veers wildly, and you're sure you're about to crash. You're clinging to the bench, your snakebite forgotten in the panic, wondering if you'll die in a wreck or a shootout. Either way, the Wild West's not letting you off easy. Miraculously, a posse from town appears, their rifles cracking. The bandits scatter, one falling from his horse, and the coach slows to a stop. The passengers are shaken but alive, and you're trembling like a leaf in a storm. The woman in the bonnet checks on you, but her kindness can't erase the terror. You climb out, legs wobbly, and see the driver's alive but bleeding. The posse's rounding up the bandits' horses, but you're done. You're not cut out for this, stagecoaches, shootouts, or this relentless frontier. You're still broke, still poisoned, and now you're stranded on a dusty trail, the town a faint speck behind you. The Wild West's a meat grinder, and you're barely holding together. You're still trembling from the stagecoach ambush, sprawled on the dusty trail where the rickety coach finally stopped, its wheels creaking like a dying breath. Your snake-bit legs a throbbing mess, your throat's a desert, and you're starting to think the Wild West is personally out to get you. The posse's dragging off the captured bandits, and the other passengers are dusting themselves off, but you're too weak to move. You need help, real help, because that saloon poultice isn't cutting it. You limp back toward town, hoping for a doctor, but you're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day trusting the Wild West's dubious medical remedies. You stumble into town, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows over the dusty street. Every step feels like a nail in your leg, and you're dizzy, vision swimming like you're underwater. You ask a passerby for the doctor, and he points to a small shack with a sign reading Doc Mason, physician and barber. Historical records show frontier doctors in the 1870s were often jacks of all trades, part surgeon, part dentist, sometimes part veterinarian. With no medical schools out here, many were self-taught or straight-up quacks. You're hoping Doc Mason's the real deal, but your gut's telling you to brace for disappointment. You knock, and a lanky man with wire-rimmed glasses and a blood-stained apron opens the door. "What's Eileen or YA?" he asks, chewing tobacco. You show him your swollen, purple leg, the snakebite oozing under that foul poultice. He squints, spits into a spittoon, and says, "Rattler, eh? Let's fix YA up." He ushers you into a cramped room smelling of whiskey and carbolic acid. The office is a nightmare, a table covered in rusty tools, jars of mysterious powders, and a shelf with books that look older than the town. You're already regretting this, but passing out in the street isn't an option. Doc Mason sits you on a wobbly chair and pokes at the bite, making you wince. "Seen worse," he mutters, but his tone's not convincing. He grabs a bottle labeled Elixir of Vitality and pours a slug into a dirty glass. "Drink this," he says. You sniff it, smells like turpentine and regret, but you choke it down, gagging as it burns your throat. A quirky tidbit? Frontier doctors often prescribed cure-alls laced with opium or arsenic, which sometimes killed faster than the ailment. You're hoping this isn't one of those, but your stomach's doing flips, and not the fun kind. He slaps a new poultice on your leg, something green and slimy that smells like a swamp. "Old Comanche recipe," he says, winking. You're not sure if he's joking or delusional, but it stings worse than the snakebite. He then pulls out a knife, muttering about bleeding the poison. You jerk back, stammering, "No cutting." He laughs, like you're the crazy one, and says, "Fine, but don't blame me when you're pushing a daisies." Historians still argue whether frontier medicine was more art or accident. Some say doctors saved lives, others claim their cures were often deadlier than the disease. Right now, you're leaning toward the latter. You ask about antivenom or real medicine, and Doc Mason snorts. Fancy city stuff don't make it out here. He offers to pull a tooth instead, claiming it'll balance your humors. You decline, wondering if you've stumbled into a medieval reenactment. Your legs know better, and the elixir's making you woozy, not healed. You're starting to think that saloon cowboy's whiskey was a safer bet. You pay him with a promise to sweep his floor later, your only currency, and limp out, feeling like you've just survived a horror show audition. The street's quiet now, the town settling into dusk, but you're worse off than before. Your legs are pulsing disaster, and the doctor's cure has you nauseous, head spinning like a bad carnival ride. You slump against a wall, the shack's lantern glow mocking you. You're still broke, still starving, and now you're poisoned by both a snake and a quack. The Wild West's medicine isn't science, it's a gamble, and you're losing. You hear a harmonica somewhere, its mournful wail matching your mood. Day one's dragging you down, and you're wondering if you'll limp through the night or just collapse under its weight. You're slumped against the wall outside Doc Mason's shack, your snake-bit leg a swollen, angry mess, and that elixir of vitality churning your stomach like a bad burrito. The town's settling into a dusky hush, lanterns flickering to life, but you're still broke, starving, and now queasy from frontier medicine. You need a win, something to turn this day around, so you limp toward the saloon again, hoping to hustle a meal or a coin. Instead, you spot a poker game through the window, cards flying and coins clinking. You figure you've watched enough TV poker to try your luck, but you're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West's rigged gambling dens. You push through the saloon's swinging doors, the air thick with cigar smoke and the clink of glasses. The poker table's in the corner, lit by a flickering oil lamp, where 4 players, a cowboy with a scarred cheek, a slick gambler in a vest, a miner with dirt-caked hands, and a woman with a sharp-eyed stare, trade bets and glares. Historical records show saloons were gambling hubs in the 1870s, with poker and faro drawing crowds, but cheating was as common as whiskey. You've got no money, but you spot a discarded chip on the floor, worth a nickel, maybe enough to buy in. You scoop it up, ignoring the sawdust sticking to your fingers, and approach the table. The cowboy squints at you. You play greenhorn. You nod, trying to channel every poker face you've seen on ESPN, and slide into a seat. The chip gets you one hand, but you're out of your depth. You don't know the rules here, 5-card draw, no Texas Hold'em, and the table's vibe is less friendly than a rattlesnake convention. You're dealt a hand, 2 jacks, a queen, and junk. Not bad, you think, but the gambler's smirking like he's already won. You bet your chip, and the others raise with coins you can't match. You're all in, and it's barely a start. The woman deals new cards, her fingers too quick, and you suspect she's palming aces. A quirky tidbit? Some Wild West gamblers used marked cards or mirrors hidden in rings to cheat, and honest players often ended up broke, or buried. You swap 2 cards, hoping for a miracle, but get nothing. The cowboy folds, muttering about damn sharps, but the gambler raises again, tossing in a silver dollar. You've got nothing left, so you try bluffing, puffing up like you're holding a royal flush. The miner laughs, a gravelly sound, and says, "Boy, your face tells a story, and it ain't a good one." You show your hand, 2 jacks, and the gambler lays down 3 kings, grinning like a fox in a henhouse. The table erupts in laughs, and you realize you've been played. The woman scoops the pot, and you're out, your one chip gone faster than your dignity. You try to laugh it off, but the gambler leans in, his breath sour with whiskey. You owe for was 10 hour time, he says, tapping a knife on his belt. Your stomach drops, same as it did with that rustler's robe, and you're wishing you'd stuck to begging. Historians still argue whether saloon gambling was more about skill or scams. Some say sharps fleeced greenhorns like you daily. Right now, you're Exhibit A. You stammer an apology, backing away, but the miner grabs your arm. Pay up or work it off, he growls. You've got no coin, no skills, and your legs throbbing worse than ever. You offer to clean the saloon, but the bartender, wiping a glass, shakes his head. Got enough drunks for that. Desperate, you mention your snakebite, hoping for pity, but the woman just snorts. Should have bet on Din, better odds. The table laughs again, and you're the punchline, again. You're starting to think the Wild West's got a personal grudge against you. You slip out before the gambler's knife gets friendlier, the saloon's noise fading behind you. The street's dark now, stars sharp overhead, and you're worse off than before, and no chip, no meal, just a bruised ego and a leg that feels like it's plotting mutiny. You slump against a barrel, the cold biting through your thin shirt. The gambling den didn't just take your shot at a win, it showed you how fast this world chews up fools. You're still poisoned, still starving, and now you're dodging card sharps with short tempers. The Wild West's a rigged game, and you're out of chips before the night's even over. You're slumped against a barrel outside the saloon, the sting of your poker loss sharper than the chill creeping through your threadbare shirt. Your snake-bit legs are pulsing wreck, your stomach's howling, and that elixir of vitality from Doc Mason still making your head spin. The town's gone quiet, save for the distant wail of a coyote, but the Wild West doesn't sleep easy. A cold wind kicks up, rattling shutters, and you realize the desert night's about to get brutal. Winter's coming early, and you're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day facing a frontier blizzard with no proper shelter. You pull yourself up, shivering, and limp toward the boarding house where you woke this morning, hoping for a warm bed. But the door's locked, and the landlady's voice snaps through a window, no pay, no stay. You've got nothing to offer, so you're stuck outside, the temperature dropping fast. Historical records show winters in the 1870s West could be savage, blizzards swept through plains and deserts, catching settlers unprepared. Temperatures sometimes plunged below zero, and without insulation or decent clothes, hypothermia was a silent killer. You're in thin cotton, no coat, no hat, and the wind's already slicing through you like a knife. You stumble down the street, looking for anywhere to hunker down. The saloon's still open, but after your poker disaster, you're not keen on facing that crowd again. You spot an alley with a stack of crates and crawl behind them, hoping they'll block the wind. They don't. The cold's relentless, creeping into your bones, and your breath's puffing out in frosty clouds. You're thinking about that stagecoach ride, rough, but at least it was warm, and wishing you'd stayed on, bandits or not. Your leg's numb now, which might be a bad sign, but you're too tired to care. You try to rub your hands for warmth, but your fingers are stiff, and the snakebite's making your whole body feel like a traitor. You spot a tattered blanket in the alley, half buried in dirt, and grab it, ignoring the smell of mildew and worse. It's thin as paper, but it's something. You wrap it around you, curling up tighter, and notice the sky's gone heavy with clouds. Snowflakes start falling, small at first, then thicker, dusting the ground like ash. A quirky tidbit? Some settlers burned buffalo chips, dried dung, for warmth when wood ran out. You're eyeing the alley's refuse, wondering if you're desperate enough to try it. Spoiler, you're getting there. The wind howls, driving snow into your face, and the crates offer no real cover. Your teeth chatter, and you're shivering so hard it feels like a seizure. Historians still argue whether exposure or starvation killed more in frontier winters. Some say the cold was deadlier, creeping into poorly built shacks and claiming whole families. You're not even in a shack, just a flimsy crate fort that's starting to feel like a coffin. You think about starting a fire, but you've got no matches, and the alley's junk is too damp to burn. Your modern know-how, cranking a heater or grabbing a hoodie, is useless here. You hear footsteps and peek out, hoping for help. It's a drunk stumbling from the saloon, singing off-key. You call out, voice weak, but he just waves you off, muttering, sleep it off, bum. Great. You're not just freezing, you're invisible. The snow's piling up now, and your blanket's soaked, heavy as a lie. You're starting to feel sleepy, which you vaguely recall is a bad sign. Hypothermia's sneaky like that. You try to stay awake, slapping your face, but your body's shutting down, and the cold's whispering for you to give up. You think about that Gold Rush Creek, the bandits, the hanging tree, each a punch you barely dodged. Now the weather's throwing the knockout blow. You crawl deeper into the crates, hoping to trap some body heat, but it's like trying to warm a tomb. The snow's relentless, and your legs gone from numb to a dull ache, like the snake bites mocking you one last time. The Wild West's winter doesn't need guns or ropes to finish you, it's got ice, wind, and your own frail body. You're still broke, still poisoned, and now you're freezing in a town that doesn't care if you wake up. Night's closing in, and you're wondering if you'll see dawn. You're huddled behind those flimsy crates, the blizzard's icy fingers clawing through your tattered blanket, your snake-bit leg a distant throb under the numbing cold. The town's a ghost in the swirling snow, lanterns barely visible through the whiteout. You're shivering so hard your teeth feel like they'll crack, and every breath stings your lungs. You're still broke, still poisoned, and now freezing to death in an alley. But the Wild West isn't done testing you. As you huddle, you overhear whispers from the street, something about a dispute with a nearby native tribe. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day misstepping in tense tribal territory negotiations, where one wrong move could spark a deadly clash. You force yourself to stand, legs wobbling like a newborn foal, and peek out from the alley. A group of townsfolk, bundled in coats you'd kill for, are arguing near the saloon. They're talking about a local tribe, maybe Apache or Navajo, demanding compensation for cattle grazing on their land. Historical records show the 1870s West was a powder keg of tension between settlers and native tribes, with broken treaties and land disputes often erupting into violence. You're no diplomat, but you're desperate for warmth, so you limp closer, hoping to blend in and maybe sneak into the saloon's heat. The crowd's heated, faces red from cold and anger. A rancher's shouting about savages stealing his herd, while a shopkeeper argues for talking, not fighting. You're just trying to stay upright, but your ragged appearance draws eyes. A cowboy with a frost-tipped beard squints at you. You with the tribe, he snaps, mistaking your silence for guilt. You shake your head, stammering about being a stranger, but he's not listening. Your modern instincts, maybe cracking a joke to diffuse things, are useless here. The Wild West doesn't do chill. You try to back away, but the crowd's closing in, their voices sharp as the wind. A woman in a shawl mutters about spies for the tribe, and you realize you're a scapegoat again, like with that rustler's rope. A quirky tidbit? Some tribes and settlers seal deals with shared meals of jerky and flatbread, but misunderstandings, like offering pork to a tribe that avoided it, could spark fights. You're not offering anything, but you're still in trouble. You mumble about your snakebite, hoping for pity, but the cowboy grabs your arm, his grip like iron. Talk, or you're done, he says, and you smell whiskey on his breath. You're dragged toward the saloon, where a meeting's happening. Inside, it's warmer, but the mood's colder than the blizzard. A tribal envoy's there, tall, wrapped in a blanket, his face unreadable. He's flanked by 2 warriors, their knives glinting in the lamplight. The townsfolk are armed too, and you're stuck in the middle, a nobody with no stake but all the risk. The envoy speaks, voice calm but firm, demanding the ranchers stop grazing on sacred land. The rancher from earlier, Mr. Handlebar Mustache, snorts and says, "Ain't your land no more." You wince, knowing that's the kind of talk that starts wars. Historians still argue whether these clashes were driven by greed or fear. Some say settlers provoked tribes to justify taking more land, others claim mutual distrust fueled the cycle. Right now, you're just trying not to get caught in the crossfire. You're pushed forward, the cowboy accusing you of sneaking for the tribe. The envoy glances at you, his eyes sharp, and you realize he thinks you're part of the town's mess. You're trapped between 2 sides, neither trusting you, and your legs screaming, making it hard to think straight. You stammer a defense, saying you're just a drifter, but the rancher cuts you off. "Shut it, spy!" He's itching for a fight, and you're the easiest target. The envoy raises a hand, silencing the room, and says something in his language. One of his men nods and steps toward you, knife drawn. You're about to bolt, but your leg buckles, and you hit the floor, snow melting off you in puddles. The saloon's tense, hands on guns and knives, and you're the spark that could ignite it all. Miraculously, the shopkeeper intervenes, saying, "He's just a fool, not a spy." It's not flattering, but it works. The envoy nods, and the tension eases, but you're still shaking as you crawl to a corner. The meeting resumes, but you're done, too weak, too cold, too scared. You're still poisoned, still starving, and now you've nearly sparked a war. The Wild West's diplomacy is as brutal as its blizzards, and you're no match for either. The saloon's warmth is a small mercy, but you're wondering if you'll survive the night's next twist. You're slumped in the saloon's corner, the faint warmth doing little to thaw the chill in your bones or the fear from nearly sparking a tribal clash. Your snake-bit legs are swollen, throbbing disaster, and your stomach so empty it's practically eating itself. The saloon's noise, angry voices, clinking glasses, fades as you focus on staying conscious. You need a break, but the Wild West doesn't do timeouts. You overhear talk of a nearby mine hiring workers, and with no other options, you limp toward the promise of a paycheck. But you're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West's dangerous mines, where collapsing tunnels and back-breaking labor are just the start. You stagger out into the snowy night, the blizzard easing but leaving a biting cold. The mine's a mile out of town, and the trek feels like a marathon with your legs screaming and your body weak from hunger. Historical records show mining boomed in the 1870s, with silver and gold luring men into brutal conditions, caves INS, explosions, and lung-choking dust were daily risks. You're no miner, but you're desperate for coin to buy food or a bed. The trail's dark, the snow crunching under your boots, and you're shivering so hard you can barely walk straight. You reach the mine, a black moor in a rocky hillside, lit by flickering lanterns. A foreman, a burly man with a soot-streaked face, sizes you up. You look half dead, he says, but he hands you a pickaxe when you beg for work. "Don't die on my shift." You nod, clutching the heavy tool, and follow a group of miners into the tunnel. The air's damp and smells of earth and sweat, the walls glistening with moisture. Your modern self, used to desk jobs or air-conditioned comfort, is already screaming to quit, but you need the money. Inside, the tunnel's a claustrophobic nightmare, low ceilings, jagged walls, and lanterns casting shadows that dance like ghosts. You're told to chip at a vein of ore, but the pickaxe feels like swinging a sledgehammer. Each strike jars your arms, and dust clogs your throat, making you cough until your ribs ache. A quirky tidbit? Some miners believed singing kept spirits away in the tunnels, but the only thing haunting you is your own bad decisions. Your legs throbbing worse, and every swing sends pain shooting through it. You're wondering if that snakebite or Doc Mason's elixir will kill you before the mine does. The other miners, hardened men with calloused hands, barely glance at you. One mutters, "Greenhorn won't last a shift." He's probably right. The air's getting thinner, and you're dizzy, sweat mixing with dust on your face. Then you hear a low rumble, like distant thunder, and the ground shakes. "Cave in," a miner yells, and panic erupts. You drop your pickaxe, heart pounding, as rocks tumble from the ceiling. Historians still argue whether poor engineering or greed caused most mine disasters. Some say companies cut corners, others blame reckless digging. Right now, you just want out. You scramble toward the entrance, but the tunnel's a maze, and dust blinds you. A miner grabs your arm, pulling you toward a side shaft as rocks crash behind you. You're coughing, choking, your leg barely holding you up. The lanterns flicker out, and you're in darkness, the air thick with grit. You hear shouts, then silence, and you're sure you're trapped. Your modern panic, calling 911, waiting for rescue, is a fantasy here. Miners often dug their own way out or didn't make it. You claw at the dirt, hands bleeding, until a faint light appears. The foreman's voice barks, "Move, you fool," and you stumble into open air, collapsing in the snow. You're alive, barely, gasping like a fish on land. The mine's still rumbling, and the foreman's cursing about lost ore. You're not getting paid, surviving's your only reward. Your leg's worse, your hands are shredded, and you're coughing up dust like it's your new job. The miners head back in, but you're done. You limp away, the mine's dark mouth mocking you. You're still broke, still poisoned, and now you've dodged death in a collapsing tunnel. The Wild West's work isn't just hard, it's a death trap, and you're barely hanging on as night deepens. You're limping away from the mine, your hands raw and bleeding, your snake-bit leg a pulsing agony, and your lungs still coughing up dust from that near cave-in. The snow stopped, but the night air's sharp as a blade, cutting through your tattered clothes. You're back in town, the streets quiet except for the occasional drunken shout from the saloon. You're desperate for water, clean water, not that slimy trough muck from earlier, but the Wild West's resources are fought over like gold. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day in the brutal water wars, where a shrinking, contested well could spark a fight you're too weak to win. You stumble toward the town's only well, a rickety wooden structure near the general store, its bucket swaying in the wind. A small crowd's already there, arguing loudly, their lanterns casting jittery shadows. You hear snippets about the well running low, droughts hit hard, and every drop's precious. Historical records show water disputes in the 1870s West were deadly serious. Towns and ranches fought, sometimes killed, over springs and streams, especially in arid regions like this. You're no fighter, but your throat's so dry you're ready to beg, steal, or grovel for a sip. You push closer, clutching your aching leg, and try to blend in. The crowd's tense, a rancher, a shopkeeper, and a few rough-looking cowhands are squaring off. The rancher's claiming the well for his cattle, while the shopkeeper insists townsfolk get priority. You just want a drink, but your ragged appearance draws glares. "Who's this?" a cowhand snaps, hand on his pistol. You mumble about being a traveler, but he cuts you off. No water for drifters. You're too parched to argue, but you're not leaving, you're dizzy, and that snakebite's making you feel like death's knocking. The shopkeeper pulls up a bucket, but it's barely half full, the water muddy and flecked with grit. The crowd surges, and you're shoved aside, nearly falling. You catch yourself on the well's edge, but the rancher grabs your collar. "Back off, thief," he growls, mistaking you for a water hog. You're thinking about that rustler's rope, same vibe, different crime. A quirky tidbit? Some towns hired water guards to protect wells, armed men who'd shoot before sharing. You glance around, hoping there's no guard here, but the cowhand's gun looks ready enough. You try to explain your need: snakebite, no food, no shelter, but your voice is a rasp, and the rancher's not listening. He shoves you, and you hit the ground, pain shooting through your leg. The crowd shouting now, fists raised, and someone throws a punch. It's chaos, like that saloon brawl, but colder and meaner. Historians still argue whether water wars were about survival or power. Some say drought forced hard choices, others claim greed turned neighbors into enemies. Right now, you're just collateral, sprawled in the dirt as boots kick up dust around you. You crawl away, dodging a stray kick, and spot a spilled bucket, a few drops glistening in the mud. You're so desperate you consider licking the ground, but a woman's voice stops you. "Here," she says, tossing you a dented canteen. She's the bonnet-wearing woman from the stagecoach, her face softer now. You gulp the water, warm, stale, but glorious, until she yanks it back. "That's enough," she says, not unkindly. You nod, grateful, but the crowd's still fighting, and the rancher's threatening to burn the store if he doesn't get more water. You stagger to your feet, clutching the well's edge for support. The water's eased your thirst, but your leg's worse, and your body's screaming for food. The fight's escalating, someone draws a knife, and you're out. You limp toward an alley, the well's chaos fading behind you. That tiny sip was a miracle, but it's not enough to save you. You're still poisoned, still starving, and now you've dodged another brawl over something as basic as water. The Wild West's not just harsh, it's a battleground for survival, and you're barely armed. The night's deepening, and you're wondering what's next in this relentless gauntlet. You're slumped in the alley, the precious sip of water from that kind woman's canteen already a fading memory in your parched throat. Your snake-bit legs are swollen, throbbing traitor, and your body's weak from hunger, cold, and the relentless grind of this day. The well brawl's noise echoes faintly, but you're too battered to care. As you huddle in the shadows, trying to ignore the chill seeping into your bones, you hear hoofbeats and urgent shouts. A man's running down the street, yelling about a wanted poster with your face on it. You're now a hunted man for a crime you didn't commit, and you're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day dodging bounty hunters in the Wild West. You peek out, heart pounding, and spot a tattered poster nailed to a post, a crude sketch that vaguely looks like you, labeled "Wanted, $50 reward, dead or alive, for robbery." Robbery? You haven't stolen so much as a crust of bread. Well, you thought about it, but that's not the point. Historical records show bounty hunting was big business in the 1870s, with posters often slapped up on flimsy evidence, targeting drifters like you to settle grudges or clear dockets. You're no outlaw, but that poster's a death sentence in a town itching for justice, real or not. You duck back into the alley, your breath ragged, the cold biting harder now. The poster's probably from that rancher who accused you of rustling, or the gambler you ticked off at poker, someone with a grudge and enough coin to frame you. Your legs screaming, and you're too weak to run far, but staying here's not an option. You hear boots crunching nearby and spot a man in a long coat, a bounty hunter by the look of his steely eyes and the rifle slung over his shoulder. He's scanning the street, poster in hand, and you're sure he's got your name, or at least your sketch, in his sights. You crawl deeper into the alley, past rotting crates and a stray cat that hisses like it knows you're doomed. Your modern instincts, calling a lawyer, posting a TikTok to clear your name, are laughably useless. You're thinking about that stagecoach ambush. Those bandits had it easy compared to you, with no one hunting them for sport. A quirky tidbit? Some bounty hunters were so ruthless they'd bring in corpses without checking names, collecting rewards on close enough matches. You're hoping this guy's not that sloppy, but the $50 price on your head isn't exactly inspiring confidence. The bounty hunter's boots stop at the alley's mouth, and you hold your breath, pressing against a damp wall. He mutters something, then moves on, but you're not safe. You need to get out of town, but your leg's barely functional, and the desert's a death trap at night. You consider turning yourself in, but after that vigilante hanging, you know justice here is a coin toss between a rope and a bullet. Historians still argue whether bounty hunting cleaned up the West or just fueled chaos. Some say it deterred crime, others claim it turned innocents like you into prey. Right now, you're feeling very prey-like. You limp toward the town's edge, sticking to shadows, every creak or rustle making you jump. You spot a livery stable, maybe you could steal a horse, but you remember your disastrous ride on Thunder and scrap that idea. Besides, horse theft's a hanging offense, and you're already dodging one rap sheet. You hear a shout, "There he is!" and spin to see a kid pointing at you, probably thinking he'll earn a dime for ratting you out. You hobble faster, but your leg gives out, and you crash into a fence, pain exploding like a firecracker. You crawl behind a barrel, heart racing, as the bounty hunter's boots return, closer now. You're trapped, too weak to fight, too slow to run. You're thinking about that saloon poultice, that Gold Rush Creek, all the ways this day's beaten you down. The Wild West doesn't care about your innocence, it's a machine that grinds up the unlucky, and you're caught in its gears. You hear the hunter cock his rifle, and you're wondering if you'll see morning or become another poster's faded ink. The night's closing in, and you're out of moves in this deadly game. You're crouched behind that barrel, heart hammering like a blacksmith's anvil, the bounty hunter's boots crunching closer in the snowy alley. Your snake-bit legs are numb, swollen wreck, your body's weak from hunger, and the cold's gnawing at you like a starved coyote. The wanted posters turned you into a target, and you're running out of places to hide. As you shiver in the dark, you notice a fever creeping in, your skin's hot despite the chill, and your head's pounding worse than after Doc Mason's elixir. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day facing a smallpox outbreak in the Wild West, where no immunity and scarce medicine spell disaster. You force yourself to move, crawling through the alley to avoid the bounty hunter's gaze. His lantern swings past, and you slip behind a stack of crates, but the effort leaves you dizzy, sweat beading despite the snow. You touch your forehead, burning, and notice red spots on your arms, faint but ominous. Smallpox was a scourge in the 1870s, historical records show, sweeping through frontier towns with no vaccines and little understanding of quarantine. It killed thousands, especially those like you with no immunity, and towns often burn victims' belongings, or bodies, to stop the spread. You're no doctor, but you know this isn't good. You limp toward the boarding house, hoping for shelter to ride out the fever, but the streets are buzzing with whispers of pox and quarantine. A crowd's gathered near the general store, and you overhear talk of a sick family locked in their shack. The townsfolk are scared, some clutching handkerchiefs over their faces like that'll help. You're trying to stay unnoticed, your wanted posters still out there, but your staggering gait and flushed face draw eyes. A woman gasps, pointing at your spots. "He's got it," she shrieks, and suddenly you're the town's newest leper. You try to explain, snakebite, exhaustion, anything but smallpox, but your voice is a weak croak, and the crowd's backing away, hands on guns. A quirky tidbit? Some frontier folks thought smallpox came from bad air and burned sage to ward it off, about as useful as your saloon poultice. You're swaying now, the fever making the world tilt, and you collapse against a hitching post. A man in a scarf, maybe the preacher from that vigilante hanging, yells for the sheriff, but you know he's useless. You're thinking about that stagecoach ride, wishing you'd stayed on despite the bandits. The crowd's shouting for quarantine, and two men in gloves grab you, dragging you toward a shack on the town's edge. You're too weak to fight, your leg dragging like dead weight. The shack's a grim box, smelling of mildew and despair, with a straw pallet and a bucket for a bathroom. They shove you inside, slamming the door, and you hear a lock click. Historians still argue whether smallpox quarantine saved lives or just hid the problem. Some say isolation slowed outbreaks, others claim it left victims to die alone. Right now, you're feeling the alone part, trapped with no food, no water, and a fever that's turning your brain to mush. You slump onto the pallet, the red spot spreading across your chest. Your legs a forgotten ache compared to this new hell, shivers, sweats, and a headache like a hammer. You're thinking about that Gold Rush Creek, the water wars, all the times you dodged death today, only to end up here. The shack's walls are thin, and you hear the wind howling, snow piling up outside. You're wondering if the smallpox will kill you or if the bounty hunter will break in first. Either way, you're not betting on yourself. You try to stay awake, banging on the door, but no one comes. The fever's got you hallucinating now, images of that hanging tree, the saloon's card table, the mine's collapsing tunnel. Your modern self, with its vaccines and urgent care, would have laughed off this day, but here you're just a body waiting to break. The Wild West's diseases don't care about your innocence or your empty stomach, they're as merciless as its blizzards or bandits. You're still poisoned, still hunted, and now you're burning up in a plague shack, wondering if this is where your day ends. You're curled up on the straw pallet in that grim quarantine shack, the smallpox fever turning your body into a furnace despite the icy draft creeping through the walls. Your snake-bit legs a dull throb, barely noticeable under the pounding headache and red spots blooming across your skin. The shack's a prison, locked door, no food, no water, and the bounty hunter's shadow still looms outside, his wanted poster branding you a criminal. You're barely clinging to consciousness when you realize your troubles aren't just disease and hunters, your clothes are tattered, your boots are splitting, and your tools, if you had any, are useless in this harsh world. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day struggling to maintain gear in the Wild West's unforgiving environment. You shift on the pallet, the straw jabbing your back, and notice your shirt's more holes than fabric, shredded from the mine's rocks and the desert's thorns. Your boots, already thin when you arrived, are cracking, letting snow seep in. Historical records show frontier life in the 1870s was a constant battle against wear and tear, clothes, tools, and weapons rusted or broke fast in the desert's extremes, and repairs were a luxury. You've got no needle, no thread, no spare leather, and no clue how to fix anything. Your modern reliance on Amazon replacements is a cruel joke here. You try to stand, hoping to find something, anything, to patch your boots or block the draft. The shack's bare except for a rusty nail and a splintered board. You pry the nail free, thinking maybe you can use it to stitch your boot sole, but it's dull, and your hands are too shaky from fever. You're remembering that saloon cowboy's bandana, how he wrapped your snakebite with it, filthy, but functional. You've got nothing like that now, just a blanket so thin it's practically a ghost. A quirky tidbit? Some settlers used cactus spines as needles, sewing with horsehair. You're not that resourceful, and the thought of wrestling a cactus again makes you shudder. The fever's making you clumsy, and you drop the nail, cursing under your breath. Your boots are done for if you ever escape this shack, the snow and rocks will tear your feet apart. You think about the stagecoach, the mine, all the ways this day's chewed up your gear and your spirit. Even if you had tools, a knife, a gun, they'd rust in this damp, dusty world without constant care. Historians still argue whether poor equipment or lack of skill doomed more settlers. Some say shoddy gear broke spirits, others blame greenhorns like you who couldn't maintain it. Right now, you're failing on both counts. You hear voices outside, townsfolk arguing about burning the shack to cleanse the pox. Great! Your gee's falling apart, and now your shelter might go up in flames. You bang on the door, shouting, but your voice is a hoarse rasp, and no one cares. You slump back, the fever spiking, and try to wrap your shredded shirt tighter around you. It's useless, the cold seeping in, and your body's too weak to fight it. You're thinking about that well brawl, how even water was a battle. Now you're battling to stay warm, stay alive, and you're losing. You notice a crack in the shack's wall, letting in a sliver of moonlight. You could try to pry it wider, escape before the bounty hunter or the townsfolk come for you, but your hands are raw from the mine, and the board won't budge. Your modern self would have ordered a new jacket, called a handyman, but here you're stuck with nothing but your fading strength. The smallpox spots are spreading, and you're too dizzy to think straight. You're still hunted, still poisoned, and now your gee's betraying you as much as your body. The Wild West's environment doesn't just wear you down, it dismantles you, piece by piece, and you're running out of pieces. You curl up, trying to conserve heat, but the pallet's damp, and your boots are letting in snowmelt. The voices outside grow louder, and you smell smoke, maybe they're serious about burning this place. You're trapped, your body and belongings falling apart, and the Wild West's laughing at your expense. You're wondering if you'll die of fever, fire, or a bounty hunter's bullet first. The night's a black void, and you're sinking deeper into its grip, with nothing to hold onto but your own fading hope. You're shivering on the damp pallet in that smallpox-ridden shack, the fever burning through you while the cold seeps in through your tattered clothes and cracked boots. The faint smell of smoke from outside has your heart racing. Either the townsfolk are planning to torch this place, or it's just a campfire nearby. Your snake-bit legs are numb ache, your body's weak from hunger, and that bounty hunter's wanted poster still has you marked. You're barely holding on when you hear gunfire in the distance, sharp and chaotic, followed by shouts of posse. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day caught in a deadly posse shootout, where bullets fly faster than reason in the Wild West. You crawl to the shack's cracked wall, peering through the sliver of moonlight. The streets alive with chaos, horses galloping, men yelling, and the crack of rifles splitting the night. It's a posse, likely chasing outlaws like those bandits from the stagecoach hold-up, and they're tearing through town. Historical records show posses in the 1870s were often makeshift, formed by angry citizens or hired guns, and shootouts could turn streets into slaughterhouses. You're locked in this shack, a sitting duck, and your wanted poster makes you a target for both sides, outlaws or lawmen. Nobody's asking questions first. The gunfire's getting closer, and a bullet splinters the shack's wall, inches from your head. You drop flat, heart pounding, the fever making the world spin. You're thinking about that vigilante hanging, how quick this town is to judge. If the posse finds you, that poster's all they'll need to shoot first. You try the door again, banging weakly, but the lock holds, and the smoke smells stronger now. A quirky tidbit? Some posses were so trigger-happy they gunned down innocent bystanders, mistaking them for outlaws in the heat of battle. You're really hoping you're not about to be one of those. You hear a scream outside, then hoofbeats thundering past. The shack shakes as something, maybe a horse, crashes nearby. You're trapped, your shredded gear offering no protection, and your body's too weak to break out. You're remembering the saloon brawl, the mine's collapse. Every near-death moment today feels like practice for this. Historians still argue whether posses restored order or just fueled violence. Some say they scared off criminals, others claim they were mobs with badges. Right now, you're just praying a stray bullet doesn't find you before the smallpox does. You crawl under the pallet, hoping it's cover, but it's flimsy as your hopes. The gunfire peaks, then quiets, replaced by shouts of "Got him," and "Check the bodies." You're shaking, fever and fear mixing into a sickening stew. You hear boots outside the shack, and a voice says, "Pox house, leave it." Relief washes over you, but it's short-lived. The door rattles, and you freeze, thinking the bounty hunters finally found you. Instead, it's the bonnet-wearing woman from the stagecoach, her face pale but determined. "Stay quiet," she whispers, slipping you a crust of bread through the crack before vanishing. You clutch the bread, too weak to eat but grateful for the gesture. The posse's moving off, but the smoke's thicker and you're coughing, your lungs roar from the mine's dust, and now this. Your legs useless, your fever spiking, and your geezer ruin. You're still hunted, still sick, and now you've dodged bullets in a shootout you had no part in. The Wild West's chaos doesn't care about your innocence, it's a storm that sweeps up everyone, and you're barely a leaf clinging to a branch. You huddle under the pallet, the bread in your hand, wondering if you'll survive the night or if the next bullet's got your name. You're huddled under the flimsy pallet in the smallpox shack, clutching the crust of bread that kind woman slipped you, the echo of the posse's gunfire still ringing in your ears. The smoke's thicker now, stinging your fevered eyes, and your snake-bit legs are swollen, useless weight. Your body's a wreck, starving, sick, and shivering in tattered clothes, but the Wild West hasn't finished with you. The bread's a small mercy, but it's not enough to fill the gnawing void in your stomach. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day scavenging for food as supplies dwindle in this unforgiving frontier, where starvation's slow burn is as deadly as any bullet. You force yourself to nibble the bread, each crumb a tease that only sharpens your hunger. It's stale, gritty, but you savor it like a gourmet meal, knowing it's all you've got. Historical records show food scarcity was a constant threat in 1870s frontier towns. Droughts, failed crops, and delayed supply wagons left folks scraping by on moldy biscuits or boiled leather. You're no survivalist, your modern diet of takeout and snacks hasn't prepared you for this. You're still locked in this shack, with no access to markets or kitchens, and the town's too busy with posses and pox fears to care about your empty belly. You peer through the shack's cracked wall, hoping to spot something, anything, edible. The street's quiet now, the posse gone, but the snow's left a muddy slush that buries any hope of foraging. You're thinking about that Gold Rush Creek, where you found nothing but mud, and the saloon spilled peanuts you couldn't grab. Your stomach's growling louder than that coyote from last night, and the fever's making you dizzy, blurring the line between hunger and delirium. You consider breaking out to scavenge, but the locked door and your wanted poster keep you pinned. A quirky tidbit? Some settlers ate prairie oysters, buffalo testicles, to survive lean times, a dish you're definitely not desperate enough for yet. You're hoping for something less grim, like a dropped apple or a forgotten sack of beans. You hear footsteps outside and tense, fearing the bounty hunter, but it's just a kid kicking through the mud, probably scavenging too. You whisper through the crack, begging for food, but he bolts, spooked by the Pox House label. Great! You're not just starving, you're a pariah. You try to ration the bread, but it's gone in 3 bites, leaving you hungrier than before. Your body's screaming for calories, and the smallpox fever's burning through what little strength you have. Historians still argue whether starvation or disease killed more on the frontier. Some say hunger weakened folks for infections, others claim it was the other way around. Right now, you're a case study for both. You're thinking about that well brawl, how even water was a fight. Food's no different, every scrap's a battle, and you're unarmed. You slump back, the pallet creaking under you, and scan the shack for anything edible. There's nothing but that rusty nail and a spider scuttling across the floor. You're not that far gone, but the thought crosses your mind, and it scares you. Your legs numb now, the snakebite lost in the fever's haze, but your stomach's a relentless claw. You're remembering Doc Mason's elixir, how it made you nauseous instead of helping. You trade it for a bowl of stew, but the Wild West doesn't do trades unless you've got coin or a gun. The smoke outside's fading, but the cold's not. You're shivering, fever and hunger twisting into a miserable knot. You hear a dog barking, maybe fighting over scraps, and you're jealous of a dog. You're still hunted, still sick, and now you're starving in a locked shack, with nothing but a memory of bread to keep you going. The Wild West's a scavenger's game, and you're losing, one empty bite at a time. The night's a black weight, pressing you down, and you're wondering if you'll fade out before the town's next crisis hits. You're curled up on the straw pallet in the smallpox shack, the last crumbs of that bread long gone, your stomach a hollow ache that rivals the fever burning through you. Your snake-bit legs a swollen, useless lump, and the cold seeps through the shack's thin walls, mocking your tattered clothes. The bounty hunter's shadow, the posse's gunfire, the town's endless chaos, it's all fading into a blur as your body gives out. The Wild West has thrown every punch it's got, and you're still standing, barely, but the sun's setting on this brutal day. You're about to learn why you wouldn't survive a day in the Wild West's final embrace, where the frontie's relentless grind claims you as the stars come out. You drag yourself to the shack's cracked wall, peering at the fading light. The town's gone quiet, the snow-dusted street empty except for a lone tumbleweed rolling past like it's mocking your failure. Historical records show the Wild West in the 1870s was a crucible. Disease, violence, and scarcity weeded out the weak, leaving only the toughest or luckiest. You're neither. Your modern self, soft from coffee shops and Wi-Fi, has been battered by bandits, blizzards, and bad medicine. You're thinking about that first morning, waking in the boarding house, how you thought you could hustle your way through. Now, you're just trying to stay awake. Your fever's spiking, the smallpox spot spreading like a cruel map across your skin. You're too weak to bang on the door anymore, and the smoke from earliest gone. Maybe the townsfolk gave up on burning this place, or maybe they're just waiting. Your breath's shallow, each inhale a struggle, and you're remembering that quirky tidbit about settlers eating prairie dogs to survive. You take one now, fur and all, but there's nothing here but dust and despair. Your legs numb, the snakebite a distant memory under the fever's roar, and you're wondering if you'll die of disease, hunger, or just giving up. You slump back, the pallet creaking, and stare at the ceiling, where a spider's weaving its web, unbothered by your misery. You're thinking about the gold rush, the stagecoach, the saloon, each a chance you fumbled, each a lesson in how unprepared you are. Historians still argue whether the Wild West broke people with its environment or its lawlessness. Some say nature was the killer, others point to human cruelty. You've faced both today, from the desert's heat to the hanging tree, and you're not sure which hit harder. Right now, it's all blending into one long, losing fight. The stars are visible through the wall's crack, sharp and cold, like the Wild West itself. You're too tired to move, too weak to hope. You're remembering that woman's canteen, the bread crust, the small kindnesses that kept you going. But they're not enough. The frontier doesn't care about your heart or your hustle. It's a machine that grinds down the unfit, and you're crumbling. You close your eyes, the fever pulling you under, and the shack feels like a coffin, the night a heavy lid closing over you. You're still hunted, still sick, still starving, and now you're fading, the Wild West's final sunset claiming you. The world softens now, the shack's rough edges blurring as your breath slows, each exhale a gentle sigh against the quiet night. The stars outside gleam like distant promises, their light filtering through the cracked wall, painting faint patterns on your weary hands. The Wild West's clamor, gunshots, shouts, the creak of ropes, fades into a distant hum, like a river settling into calm. You're safe here, in this moment, wrapped in the stillness of a story that's carried you far from your own world. Let the frontie's dust and danger slip away, replaced by the warm glow of rest, the soft pull of sleep. You've walked a hard road today, faced trials no modern soul could master, but now it's time to drift, to let the stars cradle you. Close your eyes, feel the weight lift, and sink into the peace of a long, quiet night. Sweet dreams.